Stop for a second and really think. What I'm about to say isn't just pretty words or a quick motivation that fades tomorrow. It can either change the next 10 years of your life, or, if you ignore it, you might stay stuck in the same cycle for another decade. Just 3 days ago, I watched a man explain himself for almost 20 minutes to someone who didn't even respect him. The other person had already made up their mind, yet he kept trying to be understood, begging for recognition he was never going to get. And then it hit me. This man isn't rare. He's everywhere, in offices, in friendships, in relationships. And if you're honest, maybe he lives inside you too. Men are not born without confidence. They are taught it out of themselves. They are programmed to bow, to explain, to manage themselves in ways that keep them small. Parents train it into obedience. Schools train it into conformity. Society trains it into predictability. And that programming builds men who can be controlled, men who never rise, men who remain manageable. But 500 years ago, there was one man who saw through all the illusions. He stripped away the noble lies society tells, and he wrote down the truths that govern power, influence, and survival. Niccolo Machiavelli, the man they called Machiavelli, created not rules of courtesy, but laws of strength. To become unstoppable is not to walk with arrogance. It is to become the man whose very presence shifts the atmosphere in a room. It is to be the one who speaks once and silence follows, not because he demands it, but because people instinctively grant it. It is to be the man who never explains, who never begs, who never folds. He lives by principles that ordinary men are too afraid to acknowledge. In these words, I will unfold for you the path from overlooked to respected, from ignored to unavoidable, from one who hopes for scraps to one who commands the table. But know this, once you see these truths, you cannot return to blindness. Once you awaken to the mechanics of influence, naivety dies. There is no going back. Inside you, there live two selves. One bows its head, apologizes for breathing too loudly, and seeks approval like a starving dog seeks scraps. The other is sovereign, certain, and untouchable. Every decision you make feeds one of them. Every act of hesitation fattens the weak self. Every act of courage fortifies the strong one. Today, you must starve the apologetic self until it withers, and feed the self that commands space. That weaker self is not yours by birth. It was handed to you. It is the voice that tells you to apologize when no wrong was done. It is the urge to explain your boundaries to someone who had no right to question them. It is the compulsion to hand out second and third chances to people who already showed you who they are. This self has kept you predictable, polite, and powerless. But here is the truth it doesn't want you to know. Every time you extend mercy to someone who tramples you, you are choosing cruelty toward yourself. Every time you allow your boundary to be broken, you are writing into their mind that you have no boundaries at all. Machiavelli understood this with a sharpness that pierced centuries. He said the man who does not govern himself will always serve the will of others. And that is the quiet slavery most men live in. The difference between your two selves is in the language they speak. The uncertain self says, I don't want to hurt their feelings. The confident self says, I refuse to compromise my standards. The uncertain self whispers, maybe I misunderstood. The confident self answers, I understood exactly, and what I saw was disrespect. The uncertain self pleads, give them another chance. The confident self replies, they already had it. Transformation does not require rage. It requires choice. The next time someone presses against your boundary, do not explain it. Enforce it. The next time someone wastes your time, stop making excuses for them. Guard your time as though it were gold, because it is. The next time someone disrespects you, do not investigate their psychology. Respond with action. Starve the weaker voice by refusing to feed it excuses. Nourish the stronger voice with choices that align with respect. This is not a path free of resistance. The uncertain self will scream. It will remind you of the comfort of being liked. It will replay old failures, hoping to drag you back. It will whisper that strength makes you cruel. Let it scream. Let it claw. Transformation has always required pain. On the far side of that struggle stands a man who does not ask permission to exist. He is not bitter, only resolute. He does not beg for acknowledgement. He commands it by the gravity of his being. And so, you must transform. Feed the confident self. Kill the apologetic one. Choose respect over approval. Choose sovereignty over servitude. Choose to be a force, not a follower. But to become unstoppable, transformation of self is only the first step. The second is to build what I call the fortress mind. Imagine your mind as it is now. Chaos, vulnerability, every word of criticism cutting like a knife, every setback shaking you, every disappointment pulling you into despair. That is not a mind fit for influence. That is a fragile hut that collapses under the first storm. You must build a fortress. The fortress mind is not made of stone, but of perspective. It no longer reacts emotionally, it interprets. Criticism no longer wounds, it informs. Betrayal no longer shocks, it confirms. Fear no longer paralyzes, it signals growth. When you stop taking life personally, you begin to see its deeper patterns. The man who insults you reveals not your weakness, but his insecurity. The woman who manipulates you reveals not your flaw, but her desperation. Machiavelli warned that the wise man acts in the present to shape the future. The fortress mind is never surprised by obstacles because it expected them all along. It does not drown in disappointment because it predicted human weakness before it appeared. It reads every event as data, every interaction as a lesson, every pain as information. And what of emotions? Most men are dragged through life by them, like horses that refuse to be tamed. Anger makes them reckless, sadness makes them weak, fear makes them immobile. But in the fortress, emotions are not masters, they are signals. Anger says, a boundary has been crossed. Pain says, here is someone's true nature revealed. Fear says, you are on the edge of transformation. The man of the fortress hears the message, but is never ruled by it. This is not the death of emotion, it is the birth of mastery. The fortress mind does not need to be cold, only unshakable. It feels, but does not surrender to feeling. It acts with strategy, not reaction. It shapes life, rather than being shaped by it. Most men live with a glass mind that cracks under pressure. You are called to build a citadel that no storm can touch. And when your fortress is complete, nothing outside you can disturb the truth of who you are inside. And now, there is another step. The step that separates men of noise from men of influence, mastering silence. The insecure man fills every space with chatter, as though words could mask his uncertainty. He argues, he defends, he justifies, and in doing so, he hands over his power. The secure man understands that silence is the loudest sound of all. When you stop explaining yourself, something remarkable occurs. People stop doubting you. They stop testing your boundaries. They stop treating you as one of them, and begin treating you as something apart, something higher. Silence makes you enigmatic, and mystery always commands respect. Think of the truly powerful. Do they explain themselves to everyone who questions them? Do they debate endlessly with those who misunderstand them? Of course not. They set the course and let others adapt. Machiavelli himself said the lion does not need to roar to be feared. In silence, you gain depth. In silence, you become unpredictable. In silence, people grant you influence you never ask for. But this silence must be strategic. When you finally speak, your words must be sharp enough to cut through the noise. A man of few words forces the world to hang on every syllable. When you decline, you say, no, not 10 reasons why. When accused, you stand unmoved. When provoked, you do not offer the satisfaction of reaction. In silence, you conserve energy. In silence, you deny your enemy's ammunition. And what happens then? The world begins to fear not your anger, but your unpredictability. The man who cannot be read is the man who cannot be controlled. Silence, however, is not your only weapon. Life will test you, break alliances, betray your trust. Friends will choose comfort over loyalty. Partners will choose money over integrity. Allies will turn when the stakes rise. The naive man collapses when disappointment strikes. The wise man turns disappointment into strength. People reveal themselves most clearly in moments of betrayal. And though the blow is painful, it is also clarity. Before the disappointment, you might still have been blind. After, you see clearly. Machiavelli wrote that men are fickle, self-serving, and changeable. Accept this truth, and you are never surprised again. Every disappointment is proof you are rising. People only betray what they envy. They only disappoint the strong, never the weak. Wear betrayal as proof of your ascent. Let others waste energy replaying conversations, searching for reasons why. You will not. You will store the lesson, remove the unworthy, and move forward sharper, cleaner, stronger. Disappointment is not your end. It is your graduation. Each time you survive it, you become harder to break, more selective, less naive. And when you stand tall after being failed by everyone, you will know you are no longer stoppable. When you look back at the journey of your own life, you begin to notice that the moments which seemed unbearable at the time were the very doors through which transformation entered. Every heartbreak, every silence, every betrayal and disappointment was not an accident. It was as if life itself was pulling you by the hand into the dark corridors where you could finally meet yourself. People think healing comes when everything is peaceful, but true healing often comes through the rupture, through the wound that refuses to close until you face what it is asking you to face. The very thing you tried to escape becomes the mirror that shows you the truth you were afraid to see. The loneliness you hated so much was not punishment, it was initiation. The emptiness you carried was not a void, but a space being cleared so that something more real could take root. The rejection you feared was not a curse, but liberation from chains you didn't realize you had bound yourself with. Every loss was an unveiling, every silence a teacher, every ending a secret beginning. When you see this clearly, you stop asking why things happened the way they did, and instead you begin to ask, what did this moment want me to awaken to? You are not here to shrink for anyone. You are here to stand as yourself, whole and unmasked. The scars you carry are not signs of defeat, but proof that you have risen through fire. Real freedom begins when you stop chasing what was never yours and start embodying the truth of who you are.